I call to order this meeting of the Gladstone Planning Commission on Tuesday, October 19th, 2021. This is our, as we've noted, this is our first meeting since April. I had a meeting with Jackie and the mayor way back around March, and we said, you know, if we don't have land use matters, we don't want to waste staff's time by just kind of talking about things that we're going to be dealing with, you know, with consultants and others later in the year. So I didn't know it would be 5 months without a meeting. And finally, 6 months later, we have one. But I'm glad you're all here tonight. And Tammy, could you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Langston.
Present.
Commissioner Natalie Smith.
Present.
Commissioner Labonte.
Present.
Commissioner Poole.
I'm present.
Commissioner Mercero.
Here.
Commissioner Pat Smith.
Pat Smith is here.
And Chair Milch.
I'm here too. Let's open with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America
and to the
republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Justice for all.
All right, we'll begin with our consent agenda. The first item on that is approval of the minutes of April 20th. Has everybody had a chance to scan those minutes and let us know if there's any additions or corrections?
Reviewed it, no notes.
Very good.
I think it looks good. If everyone's ready, I'd make a motion to accept the minutes from April. This is Commissioner Poole.
I will second that motion.
All right, we have a motion by Commissioner Les Poole, a second by Commissioner Natalie Smith and Commissioner Pat Smith. All those in favor of approving the April minutes, say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, minutes are approved. Now, we have not had a report from our planner other than written reports for quite some time. So I will turn this over to Mrs. Fields, and you may give us your reports for the last 5 months.
Well, you all received the planning reports in your packet, and the individual months are available online. So I'm going to give you a general overview because although you have not seen me at Planning Commission meetings, I have been working for the city of Gladstone. The city departments and I have met with 3 different applicants for pre-application conferences. They range from remodeling a non-conforming use to improving a pump station. And so there's a lot of things that you may see that I do not have a complete land use application in front of me to send to you yet, but I have heard a lot of projects that are wanted in Gladstone. And so you may see one later on. I also have approved one administrative review application that did not require planning commission review. And 4 people have come into the Clackamas County office, but I have responded to over 300 emails and phone calls. So what is the setback for my shed? How do I apply for a sign permit? Does this require land use approval? There's all kinds of questions. And there have been 12 building permits reviewed for land use as well as public works concerns. And so there's been building and there's been applications, just none that required planning commission review.
All right, thank you very much. I read a lot about supply chain issues and increases in prices of lumber and other supplies. Do you think that's impacting the amount of construction that's going on, or are you seeing kind of a normal number of requests for for the kinds of issues that you deal with at the planning department?
we are seeing a lot of building permits. People finally wanting to do the upgrades to their homes that they either spent the extra money on travel or finally couldn't stand it because they're stuck at home. So we see a lot of building permits in the planning department. But it's, it seems about normal in Gladstone.
Very good. All right. It just happens to be not so much design review stuff. Commissioner Smith?
Yes, Joy, I
Yes.
was wondering, the remodeling that's going on McLaughlin in the old US Bank building, do we know what that's going to be?
There was a car dealership that asked whether it would need to go through design review and looking at the parking requirements for the automobile vehicular sales versus the parking requirements for a bank. There was not additional parking, and I was under the impression that there was no site development, that it was building remodel.
Okay.
If that's incorrect, please let me know, but
No, that's fine. So it's going to be a car dealership, right?
that was the question that came to me. And if that has changed, then there's another concern, but that is what I recollect. And I saw City Administrator Betts nodding her head.
Okay.
Yes, that's correct. It should be no surprise. We are getting another car dealership on McLaughlin, and I actually signed a DMV license for that. And so you are correct. That's what's going in there.
Excellent.
Actually, that's actually in some ways good news, because the rumor that was circulating was that it was going to be, I'll use a euphemism here, let's call it an adult bookstore. But it was something that was going to be selling products that probably were not child friendly in the community. So at least families need cars. So
Also, I would like to let everyone know that our liaison, Mayor Stemple, is online. You just can't see her. She's attending the meeting.
thank you.
You're welcome.
Welcome, Mayor. All right. Well, I will accept a motion to accept the reports of the planning or the city planner.
I'll make a motion to approve the September 2021 Gladstone monthly planning report.
All right, the compilation report. Okay.
Oh,
Is
so
there a second?
I second the motion.
All right. Commissioner Langston moved and Commissioner Natalie Smith seconded to approve the reports of our planner. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, the reports are approved. Thank you, Joy. All right, the main item on our agenda is to get us updated on where we are with the downtown revitalization portion of the code updates that we're looking at. And you've seen a written report from John Southgate. And so I will turn it over to Jackie and John to present the report and to lead us through any discussion that's appropriate.
Well, thank you, Chair Milch. For those of you that don't remember who I am because you haven't met for so long, I'm Jackie Betts and I'm the city administrator. And we have been very busy these past 6 months. As you see my weekly reports and the work that staff is doing, nothing has risen to the policy level for Planning Commission, but that's about to change. And so tonight we wanted to talk to you a little bit about the next step in the downtown revitalization plan. And with us tonight is John Southgate, who's going to talk a little bit about the memo and what he believes the next step should be as we go through this process, with also adopting our housing zoning code updates that's paralleling this process. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and let John give his presentation.
Great. Good evening, Chair Milch and members of the Planning Commission and esteemed guests. I would, Chair Milch, with your indulgence, I would sort of like to maybe recapitulate some of what I said in the memo, just to bring us up to speed, because it has been so long. I know since this body even met, let alone talked about the downtown plan. I'll start with this. I think most, if not all of you know that in 2017, the City Council approved a really fine downtown revitalization plan, which called for physical improvements like rebuilding the Trolley Bridge, creating more pedestrian-friendly streetscape improvements on Portland Avenue. It called for some organizational things. It also called for that for which we're here tonight. It called for modifications to the code and to the comprehensive plan. So both code and policy, to align the code and policy with a vision for a more robust, I'll call it medium density redevelopment of downtown along Portland Avenue. So I guess another thing I want to just sort of front end comment, when City Administrator Betts first brought me onto the city team as a consultant with background in redevelopment, the first thing she really had me do was to talk to developers, both for-profit and nonprofit, about downtown Gladstone. And Jackie and I were both really excited at the response that I got. Jackie actually was able to meet with a couple of the developers herself. And the message we consistently heard is Gladstone is in a really strong position for redevelopment of its downtown. You look at the dynamics going on in places like Milwaukee and Oregon City and Lake Oswego. We have our own challenges, but we also have great opportunity, especially if we get that bridge built. That's what really piqued, I think, a lot of developer interest. But they also said, John, you need to fix your code. The current code really, I'd say, prohibits anything other than very low residential density, and also places other restrictions on new development. Fast forward, as I think you all know, the city has been involved in citywide housing policy and code efforts. I think you know, I know Chair Milch is aware that there are a major look at the housing aspects of the zoning code and the comprehensive plan to make sure that they comply with state law, specifically House Bill 2001 from a couple years ago, but also with the housing code audit, which the city received state funding for a couple of years ago to look at aligning the code with creating more housing choice. So that work is underway. The downtown code and policy work is technically a separate contract. It's the same consultant and it's on the same parallel path. I think the intention is for both the citywide housing policy work and code work to be adopted sometime, I'll say in late winter, maybe early spring of 2022. The goal is for the downtown work to be done at the same time. You may ask, I know Jackie and I have talked about this extensively, why is the downtown work not just folded into the citywide housing work? Several key reasons. First of all, the citywide housing work is looking at existing zones, and I'd say tweaking the code to make sure that, again, it aligns with the housing code audit and HB 2001. The downtown work, what was called for in the downtown revitalization plan from 2017, is a new overlay zone. So I'd say it affects the overall architecture of downtown zoning regulations more than it affects citywide zoning districts, which are existing. Second, and not necessarily in this order, but secondly, not all of the provisions in the downtown code work directly relate to housing. So the first MIG contract is just for housing code and policy. The downtown work affects housing regulations, but it also affects parking regulations and commercial development. So it's sort of apples and oranges. And then the third one is, and this is getting really esoteric and kind of out of my bailiwick. Joy could probably speak to this, but if you're going to take an existing zone and intensify the density allowed in that zone, you have to demonstrate compliance with the state transportation planning rule, the TPR. If you want a definition of the transportation planning rule, don't look at me, probably look at Joy. Hopefully Joy Well, she's smiling, so I assume that means she knows more than I do. That's a good thing. So we are on a separate but parallel path on the downtown rules. There's certainly opportunity for efficiencies. For instance, the community open houses for the housing code, we will also have a booth, so to speak, either online or hopefully physically for the downtown work. I just reviewed MIG's scope for the downtown work. I think I read that they're going to have at least 3 sessions with the planning commission. Tonight, we're not here really to debate. I mean, we can talk about downtown planning regulations all you want, but this is really not to get into the meat. I just want you to know you're going to get multiple chances at various stages, at an early draft stage and then a refined draft, then a formal adoption. So you will get to weigh in, as is that's your job as the planning commission to really influence the regulatory framework for downtown development. The last thing I want to say, and then thank you for indulging me, Chair Milch. The last, at least opening statement is, I want to share my conviction that the code language, which I would consider suggestions in the downtown revitalization plan, which I restated in my memo, I consider them suggestions. I don't necessarily agree with everything in there. I think it certainly bears more thought by all of us, and certainly the planning commission above all, and ultimately then the city council, to make sure that the codes that we come up with, boy, Chair Milch, I'm going to embarrass you, but I really appreciate what you said the other day when we spoke about this, that these regulations will lead to viable development in accordance with the vision. They enjoy community acceptance, and also that the community can afford the development that will ensue from them. So having been involved with planning and zoning regulations for a long time, longer than some of you have been alive, I think I can write suggested zoning language, and it'll make sense to me, and it might make sense to you tonight. If we were writing, we're not writing tonight, but it needs to meet the test that I think Chair Milch laid out, and part of that is talking to the community about building height, about parking requirements. It's also talking to developers. So Mr. or Ms. Developer, here's our proposed regulations. We want to see mixed use, medium density development that's aesthetically pleasing, that is conducive to a vibrant downtown. And here's our draft regulations. Do these achieve the goal? And I expect developers will probably have different opinions among themselves, but they'll say, boy, this is good, this is good, this is good. That one is going to be a real problem for me. And so I just wanted to lay out my view that the regulations that were drafted as suggestions in that 2017 plan, there's a lot of merit to it. It makes a lot of sense. Some I agree with wholeheartedly, but some I'm probably going to disagree with. So we're going to have that discussion in the coming months. We don't have to go through those line item by line item. I don't even suggest we do that really, but I just want to give you a preview of coming attractions. With that, I will shut up and happily answer questions.
All right. Do commissioners have questions for John about where we're going with this?
Yeah, I have a comment. This is not a complaint, but there's a lot going on here. We got some new folks here, and I really believe we should have had some type of a planning commission before now and an update on where we were at to get us better prepared. With that in mind, it looks like we're looking at adding in the housing needs analysis 321 units. And that I guess, it all comes down to what kind of mid-level density do we end up with versus, how high, how dense do we go downtown? Because Gladstone is Gladstone's got some real physical constraints with the rivers, and the bridge is a long ways away. The transportation side of it is real challenging. So how we think about building heights and density, and parking downtown is going to be our biggest, well, one of our biggest challenges. So, and when it comes to this, I know developers are going to want to go higher, and the community might find themselves at odds with that. So that's just more of a general comment. Could you confirm, do we have a current like 35-foot building height? Does Joy or anyone know that right now?
Yes, we do.
Yes.
Did I catch the language saying that 40 foot with a flat roof? Or is that, am I way off on that?
My understanding is that, yes, in the proposed code, it would allow with a flat roof, you could go up another 5 feet. I think that the current code also allows another full story. So I guess I go from 35 feet to 45 feet, or maybe from 3 to 4 stories. Joy, you could confirm if you have sprinklers, you have fire suppression.
That is correct. I was bringing up specifically the C2 zoning district that covers the Portland Avenue area. And the maximum building height may be increased by 1 story if the building is provided with an approved automatic sprinkler system throughout. And so that is correct. It's 35 feet plus that 1 story if they have the sprinkler system.
If I could, currently, if you have a 2-level building, which we're not talking about building them, there's no sprinkler. If you go to a 3rd floor, is that where we, by practicality or by code, actually have to have a sprinkler? Because I hear what you're saying, but I'm just trying to get a little comparison as best I can to where we're at now. And I know you may not have all the answers.
I do not. That is a building code or a fire code question.
Yeah, it's that way in the county, but I can't speak to Gladstone. I mean, you add the 3rd level. I know that was the experience in Milwaukee as well. So, and a point of that is, I don't want to get too far in the weeds, but that adds significantly to cost, and we need to think about, that aspect. And thanks for clarifying the building height question.
I would, before you go to the next question, Chair Milch, Commissioner Poole makes some really good points. The development is complex, and we'll learn more about that in future meetings. But for instance, buildings over a certain height, you might think, oh, there's more units, they'll make more money, but they're also more expensive to build. As you say, you have fire suppression. You typically, I think, if you go over 3 floors, you have to have an elevator. I think you can do, at least under certain circumstances, just stairwells for stairs for 3-story buildings. So it's complicated. I'll also say, Commissioner Poole, I hear your frustration about the kind of getting hit cold with this. The MIG team that's doing the work on the housing code, and it's also about to start on the downtown plan, will be coming before you. I don't have the schedule in front of me. I don't know if we've even scheduled their first formal presentation, but I think that's probably going to be, I think you should expect to have a November meeting. I won't guarantee that, but I think you're going to hear more soon about both the housing, citywide housing stuff, as well as the downtown stuff.
Yeah, I will say to Commissioner Poole, if MIG had been ready to make a presentation to us as a planning commission earlier in the process, we certainly would have had them come and do that. But it was just a couple of weeks ago that they had their first meeting with the advisory committee for the housing part of this. And as John has pointed out, we've gone from having a downtown revitalization committee that looked at this issue in 2017. And then we followed that shortly after that with the beginnings of the look at the housing needs analysis. We were talking about downtown and the housing related to that without really putting it in the context of the entire city. But now that we've looked at it in the context of the city and those 300 or 400 housing units that we're going to try to get, some of them may go in the downtown area, but with the housing code audit that's, and changes that are coming up, we may be seeing more what's referred to as missing middle size housing, house scale homes with more than one unit in them throughout the city. That may be what we come up with, and we may, over the next 20 years, those 300 or 400 housing units may be spread across the city in what are presently single family home neighborhoods, and maybe a smaller portion of that will be in downtown. So the issue is a lot more complicated than it was when it came to the commission 4 years ago. It's great that I think it'll be helpful to have one consultant kind of working on the two in tandem. I think that's a good decision to have them do both. And we will be hearing on both issues and be able to see how they interact with one another. Are there other questions from commissioners? Yes, Commissioner Pat Smith.
Mr. Southgate and Ms. Fields, I don't want to necessarily go over each of these bullet points in terms of their validity, but I do have some questions on what some of these things mean or reasons why they might be there. Number one is reduced parking requirements if development includes affordable housing. Why is that something that you would want to do?
I would assume that the main reason for that is that putting in parking, and especially if you put in structured parking, that adds to the cost of a unit. So this is an incentive for affordable housing, coupled with the thought, again, I'm channeling the people who wrote this back in 2017. There's probably also the presumption that, and I think this experience, other cities have experienced this, that affordable housing households earning low incomes have less cars per household than market rate middle class families. I'm surmising, but that's what typically justifies in other cities a lower parking requirement for affordable housing.
My other question would be the second from the last one, increase minimum ground floor window standards. What does that mean?
That I know is intended to make a more pedestrian-friendly environment by having not blank walls, but having windows to look into shop space or coffee shops or whatever. It's to make it a livelier pedestrian environment. I think the studies show, the proverbial studies show, that if you have just a blank wall for a certain distance, it's not conducive to pedestrian interest and attracting people to walk along a street and experience the city.
Thank you.
Most downtown revitalization kind of focus on developing a rich diversity of destinations in your downtown area. We've seen some of that happen without us making major changes. I think it was very brave of the couple who decided to buy the old Happy Chinese restaurant and turn it into a bar and grill in the midst of a pandemic. Other changes and other development that's gone on has had to go on in compliance with the codes that we currently have. But the hope is we will see a wider variety of uses and of types of destinations, because we're not trying to just address the housing market here. We're looking at the retail market, office space, tourist destinations, all of those things. It's hoped that all of that will be encompassed in the downtown as it's redeveloped and revitalized. And so in order to get that sort of richness and diversity and make it the kind of place where somebody will pull up their car and stay for 2 to 4 hours, shopping and getting their hair done and visiting the dentist and whatever else, we have to kind of look at all these issues in combination with one another. So I appreciate, John, your memo reminding us of those recommendations. I know that as we moved on to a code audit related to housing, some of the experts that were involved in that process indicated that some of the things that involve mixed use residential commercial space might not be as advisable, because I think it has to do with the building code that you have to follow for a commercial space versus a housing space. And so that's one of the other things that we'll take a look at. Do we really want to try to have residential above retail, or, are we looking to just a variety of different retail, office, entertainment type venues? But that will also be incorporated in the study. And I'm glad that MIG is taking a look at all this for us. Other questions or comments from planning commissioners?
I've got my hand up.
Oh, yes, Tom, go ahead. Commissioner Mercero.
Not a smart question here, but on about the sixth suggestion for a code amendment, eliminate height bonus for sprinkler system installation. What does that mean?
Well, again, I think the current code is, and Joy has confirmed, the current code allows an additional story if you have sprinklers in a building. This would, the code, the recommendations in 2017 were to eliminate that. Honestly, I think that building height is something we're going to want to spend some time on, and also the minimum parking. I think some of these things are pretty secondary. I think building height, I know it's always controversial. And then also reducing the parking. How low do you go before you start to really impact adjoining neighborhoods?
That answers my question. I had one other one, and I was trying to straighten out my system here, and you may have already answered this. But you made a comment in the paragraph below that section on 3-2, page 3-2, that the suggestions are too restrictive and may actually make new mixed-use development less feasible. Have you already clarified that, or would you like to?
I can't say that definitively. I'm speculating that, like I said earlier, as one who's written zoning code language and also then applied it and also work with developers, you may think, I may think I have it figured out, but then I talk to the developers and say, John, that's unfeasible. If you make us do X, whatever it is, it'd be premature for me to say which on that list, if any, need to be changed. It's possible that as we talk to developers and we get your guidance, Joy weighs in, every one of those proposed regulations may be, you know what, they're good to go. But a couple of them, Chair Milch already mentioned the one about ground floor retail. I think that's one I want to take a look at. Commissioner Smith noted the question about the parking requirement for affordable housing. At a minimum, I'd say, what does that mean? Is it a 10% reduction, a 25% reduction? I don't think we're prepared to say tonight.
Okay, that clarifies it fine. Thank you.
Commissioner Poole, I think you had your hand up. Or at least it's
yes.
still up on the screen.
Yeah.
Is that from last time, or did you have a second?
There we go. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Sorry, I'm doing this on my small little unit and my thumbs are way too big. I think I appreciate what John's saying about the uncertainty, because these are uncertain times, and with everything went into 2017, here we are, not that far down the road, and the picture's changed. But no matter what happens downtown, typically we're going to see more, it's hard to say, but one would typically see more of the higher end housing, regardless of whether you had it clear to the main floor or mixed use. Mixed use has some limits, and sometimes it gets awful expensive by the time they're done with it. So, the market's going to have a lot to do with what people can afford and how much actual affordable housing we have downtown. I think more of the affordable housing and more of the relief is probably going to come from elsewhere. But if we start changing the thoughts or formulating a better feeling for how downtown is going to develop, it's gonna open the can of parking worms for us, but we need to address that. We don't want to be another Selwood with 5 or 6 story buildings. And I'm not here to pontificate because I'm certainly not someone that thinks we should all stay 1 or 2 stories high. But I understand how these things work, and there's a lot of pressures, a lot of special interests, and we're all going to hear a lot of stuff. So I'm just trying to be very cautious about what I'm hearing. And if we get our cart way out in front of our horse, it will come back and bite us. I know that for sure. Thank you.
I really appreciate that comment that years ago, David Bragdon with Metro said that just because you plan it doesn't mean it'll happen. So we can come up with the most beautiful code. Even Joy Fields could come up with a beautiful code, but that doesn't necessarily bear on market reality. And so that's why I have this caution about, okay, here's what was recommended. It makes sense. I get the logic to what was recommended in 2017, but I really want to take a closer look at it. And honestly, with Jackie's permission, I kind of want to talk to at least a couple of developers. When we have like a draft list, in fact, I'd like to invite them to come meet with you all. I'm thinking of some developers we've had with who've helped with Jackie with our severely rent burdened city hearings. There's some great developers who are happy to give of their time and help educate all of us, myself included, about what it takes to develop a building. If I want to build a single family home, that's probably pretty bankable and predictable. If I want to build a drive-through restaurant, that's probably pretty formulaic, but mixed use development with less than typical parking and all that, and with fire suppression and all that, I don't want to speak for that developer. I want him or her to say, all right, here's what it will take for this to work for me, given the rents that I think I can get in Gladstone.
Thank you.
One of the great things about the advisory committee that we have for the housing needs code audit is that they're a very diverse group, including homeowners, people who have lived in multifamily homes before, developers, real estate people. There's a good representation, excuse me, of all the various interests that are involved in trying to decide how you encourage development of more middle range housing types. And so we'll be hearing from those kinds of people. Also, there's a stakeholders group involved with that process that has more of the developer types, I think, that John talked about. And when we did the downtown revitalization going on 4 or 5 years ago now, we also had a stakeholders group that included downtown business owners and others. And I hope that maybe we can involve some of those people in this discussion again. John, I appreciated the fact that you began your memo by reminding us that that revitalization plan included a lot of physical elements, notably the bridge going over the Clackamas River and the streetscape changes to Portland Avenue, particularly between Clarendon and Dartmouth. There was described as what do they call it? A festival street design. And you may remember that last fall, a couple of those items or funding for that would have helped with some of those items were part of the Metro transportation package that was put to voters, but that went down in the election during the pandemic. I was trying to look up the numbers specifically that related to Gladstone. From something that was published in June, they were talking about $8.3 million toward the downtown Portland Avenue streetscape and $14.4 million toward the Trolley Trail Bridge. Well, that money is not coming from those sources. Now, I know that we're getting some federal funds coming out of the pandemic that, and I don't know if any of that money will go to these kinds of things, but sometimes downtown revitalization focuses so much on the physical changes and improvements that people forget that it's the little code changes that encourage the individual private development that probably have a bigger impact. I think the restaurants and the retail stores along Portland Avenue will do fine, even if we don't dig up the streets and flatten and widen the sidewalks and all that. So if those funds aren't there, but some of the other things that encourage the development happen, I think we can still have that kind of economic growth that we're looking at. And really, this is part of all of this, both the housing part and the downtown part is part of our ongoing economic development strategy for the city. As Administrator Betts has pointed out in some other meetings where we've talked about the sustainability of various city programs, where it's somewhat of a disadvantage compared to some cities because we can't really grow much beyond the current boundaries we have. And that's the way some cities decide to get, more tax revenue is by growing physically outside their current boundaries. But I looked back at that, remember the triplex project that was approved on Exeter Street, kitty corner from the elementary school? That 1,000 square foot house on a rather large lot had property taxes of $2,000 a year prior to its conversion to a triplex. And now the property taxes on that same piece of property are $10,000 a year. Now, we're not going to see a five-fold increase in property tax revenue on every property that decides to, go from a single family home to a duplex or add an ADU or whatever. But some of that housing stuff is going, even if it's infill housing within the city, is going to really improve our tax base. And the assessed values of these properties are going to go up if people decide that 2 units or 3 units or 4 units on a lot adds, more housing units to the city and also adds more tax revenue to the city. So all of this will improve the city's ability to provide the services it provides. We don't have to add new water and sewer infrastructure to newly acquired or annexed land. We can use the capacity of the system we have. And so to some extent, this gives us an advantage over some communities. And this may be part of the reason why, as John just discovered, some developers are happy to consider Gladstone as a place to go. All right, other questions, comments? This is just kind of introduction and to kind of get us back on the same page again. I appreciate, John, all that you brought to this to us over the last, I guess it's 2018. I think you started with us. So what, been 3 years now. And your contacts in the community are very helpful because it gives us that insight from the people who really know. And we need to put that into context of all that's changed. As Commissioner Langston commented at the beginning, he does much better in meetings where he doesn't have to get in the car and drive to them. Well, if a lot of people feel that way, maybe there aren't as many people driving to work anymore. And maybe some of what we do with transportation and parking can be designed differently in a post-pandemic era. We'll have to see how that goes and what the experts say and how they advise it. Any other comments?
Yeah, if I could real briefly.
Sure.
If you look at 318 in your packet, it shows downtown revitalization, and you can see some colors in a map there. And this, of course, was taken from a while back. And there's an arrow there, a yellow arrow, that shows, reconnecting to Oregon City. And of course, that was the hopes of the trolley bridge. And the reason I bring it up is, of course, the trolley bridge it's a vital piece, but it's a lot of money and it's down the road, as we all know. So in the interim, as we infill and grow, no matter how fast or no matter what we do about that, that traffic and that arrow that shows the flow across the river is actually going to turn onto Arlington Street. and it's going to go to that mess at Arlington and 99E, or it's going to head over towards the freeway where Oakfield Road ends over at Arlington and 213. So how we're going to deal with the traffic and traffic flow, I understand isn't really so much part of today's discussion, but we're talking about our future, our economic future, and how we're going to fit this all together. And until there's a bridge or a way across that river, we've got a lot. We got a lot to think about. And the bridge is not a cure-all, but again, I don't want to get way off in the weeds here, but how we connect and how we deal with the constrained traffic we already have is going to be problematic, and we're just going to have to deal with it. And we all know what happens when something, the Abernathy Bridge, whether they toll it or not, as soon as you have a problem there, you tend to see Oregon City and Gladstone get more choked up. So transportation is going to be a big factor, even though right now it's not weighed heavily in this discussion. I do want to thank John and everyone, and I'm looking forward to the next meeting. It looks like we got plenty to do.
And just to clarify your comment, the trolley bridge, if it were to be built, is proposed as a pedestrian and bicycle only bridge. This is not an automobile traffic bridge. It may have the potential for emergency vehicles, as some of these bridges do, but it's not going to solve our automobile traffic problems by any means, except to the extent that more people are walking and using bicycles in lieu of automobiles. Yeah, those physical improvements that were part of the vision 4 years ago may not happen right away, but it'd be nice to think that the entrepreneurs and the investors who see downtown as a good destination will want to do those things regardless of the configuration of the streetscape or whether there's a bridge or not. I just like to hope that some of that will happen first and build up the kind of tax base that will enable us to do some of those other improvements down the line. All right. Yes, Mr. Labonte.
I guess being the new member, Mr. Southgate, I'd be interested just to hear you talk briefly about, and again, being new to the party here, what is it, maybe of the top 3 or 4 things about the code now in downtown that is discouraging for builders? And how much do we sweeten the pot? Or, I know that's ultimately what this conversation is about, but what do you think will get us over that threshold?
Yeah, that's actually a great question. Whether you're new or old to this board, I think, and boy, I don't have the code right in front of me. Joy can maybe help me, but I'll tell you one of the things is the downtown plan. I think, as regards zoning, the heart of it was what I call medium density mixed use. So about 3 stories, a couple of stories of residential, maybe over some shops on the ground floor. The current code, boy, Joy, I don't know if you know, but I think it's something like 16 units per acre. That's basically a townhouse density. That would not allow what I would consider medium density mixed use. That's the heart of it. I think there's also what I would consider are pretty high minimum parking standards that would require structured parking, which really makes development difficult to pencil. And again, that's why I want to have the developer come in and say, I can do it with this parking requirement, not with that. And then you have to decide, you're the stewards for the city, if only requiring X parking spaces per unit, will that create a real problem with on-street parking, or is it a reasonable balance? But those are the sort of things that I think height, density, parking, those are probably the biggest drivers of what is feasible for development.
You'll all remember one of the land use issues that we had to deal with this past year was, or I guess it was last year, was the apartment complex up on Webster Road, where they had met the minimum parking standards perfectly under the code. But the tenants they had were couples with 2 cars and 2 jobs, needing separate vehicles, and needed more vehicles than what the minimum required. So sometimes those market decisions on just how much parking is needed will lead to a developer wanting to put in more parking than the minimum is required. And that's what they had to do up there. And we gave them permission to do that. And some people will create housing where they know they are catering to people who prefer to ride a bicycle or walk or take public transit to work. And hopefully, you know, it's not going to impact the neighborhood if they have a smaller number of units. So we'll just have to see which kind of developers choose to come to Gladstone and what kind of housing they want to do. Are there other comments or questions?
I would
Joy?
like to add something, if I
Yes.
may. As the Planning Commission is thinking about the downtown revitalization plan, I have heard from developers that it's handy to have flexibility. Most recently at a county commissioner meeting, the PMAR, the Portland Metro Association of Realtors, or no, it was during the Planning Commission meeting, sorry, requested that mixed use not be only in one building, but be on a site. For funding purposes, whether being able to separate the residential from the commercial on the same site can help with developing, or for building code purposes, this flexibility can allow for mixed use on a site in a way that mixed use in a single building limits that flexibility. That may not be practical in Gladstone with the small lot sizes, but it's something to think about as a planning commission. As you think about the language of the code, language can mean a lot. And as Commissioner Poole pointed out, we don't know where we're going after the pandemic. And so as we look at increasing windows on the ground floor of developments in the downtown, how can we encourage that increased window in a housing development? Can we, instead of requiring retail on the ground floor, can we require active use? Maybe it's the fitness space for the residential development. Maybe it's the community space, like the community meeting room, but having the ground floor be active use and not limited to residential or commercial can again provide flexibility. And these are just things that as planning commissioners, as you are looking at language and hearing from developers, you're going to find options that you may not never have heard about. And so I encourage you to keep an open mind and listen to all sides so that you can find what's right for Gladstone. Because what works in Clackamas County may not work for Gladstone, and what works in another city may not work for Gladstone. But you all know your community really well. And so think about these small tweaks that allow for flexibility and encourage development in downtown.
That's an interesting comment. A lot of the zoning that we are used to in the current form of our own zoning development code has to do with prescribing the kind of uses that a particular building or piece of property is put to. But there's a trend in many cities toward form-based codes that speak more to the size and the shape and the bulk of the building itself, rather than what it's being used for. Recognizing that a building that is a dental office one year could transform itself into a restaurant another year, or even be turned into housing at some point. And as long as the buildings are sort of properly to scale with one another, that you don't have a 35-foot high 3-story building right next to a 1-story building that, completely mismatch, that's what some people design their housing code around, is more the form and the scale, and make sure that things sort of fit and go with each other. And then hopefully that over the years, the uses of a particular site could change and transform. As we've seen on Portland Avenue, we had a t-shirt store that became a pizza restaurant, that became a smoothie restaurant. A lot of things change over the years. And we'd like to see that kind of continuing growth. Yes, Commissioner Labonte.
I guess I'm wondering, with all these developments as we're moving forward, is there a scenario where it's possible where we lose storefronts to some of these buildings? Let's say if it is a living active space or whatever, is it possible that, you know, our downtown core diminishes in some way because of these proposed changes?
I would say some people that have lived here a long time will tell you that we've already seen a great diminishing of what used to be in downtown Gladstone. You know, the longtime residents recall that we had a skating rink and a bowling alley. I think there were movie theaters and other things in greater Gladstone community, that the now baby boomers, when they were teenagers, would go to these places on Friday nights with their high school friends and during the day. And we don't have as much of that in downtown now. We have some vacant lots that aren't developed at all. And we have pieces of property that sit for, like the Happy Restaurant, that sit undeveloped or unused for quite a while. So I hope we don't see more of that, of decline. But that's why we're doing what we're doing, is to try to promote a greater diversity of destinations. Yeah, did that answer your question?
I mean, to some extent, I guess I'm just concerned if we have these new buildings, if storefronts are, you know, I assume they'll be required in the downtown core. I'm just trying to foresee a situation where we kind of, you know, turn to just residential down there and away from, not saying we should, but I'm just wondering if we can get in a situation with the codes where people are developing and those business storefronts aren't, you know, part of the plan necessarily. We're early in the thing. I'm just throwing it out there.
Yeah, I know. I think what we want in downtown is a great diversity of retail and tourism and entertainment and dining and office space. And some of the current industrial type uses that are there might find that they would be just as well suited somewhere else, so that they could enable more of the destination type places. I always make the joke that nobody wants to go out, walk downtown to see who's getting a root canal in Dr. Bob's dental office, or, you know, check out what the new water heaters are at Watts. Some of those places are, you know, people would rather go downtown and, you know, shop for books or quilting supplies or flowers or baked goods or something else like that. And that's the kind of thing that will get people to go down there, park their car, perhaps pay for parking at a reasonable rate if parking management is part of all this whole process. And then really, you know, patronize a lot of businesses in that area.
Mhm.
All right, John Southgate, Jackie Betts, thank you both for, you know, keeping us posted on this, for providing the link with our consultants on these issues. And I know that what John said is going to be true. We're going to be hearing from you all and from our consultants quite frequently over the next few months. So your long summer vacation is over, planning commissioners, and there will be a lot asked of us as we move forward on this. Okay, moving on. Next, I think what we have, again, we included in the packet a summary of the project, the first meeting with the Housing Audit Advisory Committee. So I hope you'll have a chance to review that and to kind of understand the basis for that. I think it was on Zoom. I don't know if it was recorded and is available to the community, but if it is, you know, it might be helpful to watch that too, to see what was said beyond just the PowerPoint pictures that you have in your packet. So let's go now to business from the planning commissioners. We'll just go down the line. If I can remember the order, I will start with Commissioner Langston.
Thanks, Chair. Nothing to add tonight. Thank you.
All right. Commissioner Natalie Smith.
I was wondering when we might start meeting in person. And I didn't know if anyone else was interested in doing that as well.
Jackie indicated.
I'm sorry, who said that?
I said, I'll second that idea.
Yes, Jackie indicated that that beginning in November, she wants to give committees the option to decide that. I don't think at this point we're talking about meeting in the council chambers, seated as closely to each other as those seats are now. But what the city council has done at a number of their meetings and what do they call them? Work sessions lately,
sessions.
is to meet around a large group of tables so that we can maintain 6 feet of distance, but be in the room and see each other's faces and hear each other's voices and hear the nuances and the expressions and all of that. I think it will make for a more effective meeting. And, you know, individually, people may have certain vulnerabilities of themselves or within their family that they're concerned about. And I think we would want to have the option of people meeting via Zoom, no matter what we decide to do. But I think we're getting to that place where we could be meeting in person. Is there a consensus among the committee? Are you wanting to do that? Try that for our November meeting?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
I'm seeing heads nod. So
Yeah.
I think we'll give that a try
Yes.
in the format that the city council has used, which I think is in a conference room in the new city hall. But we will try to keep it online for the community. And I don't know how it'll involve the committee, the people making the presentations to us. We may have representatives there in person, or they may come to us via Zoom. But Jackie, you're hearing us that we'd like to try that in November.
Yeah, so just to clarify, what the city council did at their last meeting, which is what we're going to encourage the committees to do, is we can do 4 at the dais and 3 on the side, instead of us having to have staff set up the room with 10 microphones and then get ready for municipal court. We can't just leave the room that way. And so what worked really well was to have 4 or 3 at the dais, the others on the side, and then the community and the participants are still on Zoom. So if that's what the Planning Commission would like to do in November, the caveat to that is if you have a joint meeting with the city council, we're going to have to go back to Zoom to do Planning Commission and city council. But if it's just the Planning Commission, we can try that for November.
Okay. And the word I've heard lately is that we're thinking we're going to reach herd immunization by the end of December. So if that's the case, maybe it won't be too much of an issue when we get to 2022. But we keep our fingers crossed on that matter. All right. Other questions?
I have one more
Yes.
question I'd like to ask.
Yes.
Knowing that we're getting closer to the end of the year, I couldn't remember if we had last year when we appointed, the new chair and vice chair, if that was going to be for 2 years or if we're going to be doing that again this year. I didn't know. Does anyone remember what we decided the beginning of this year?
I've been on 2 years and we've had an election each year, so I don't know if that's an annual thing. Tammy Bannock, do you know the answer to that?
I believe it is an annual thing. So yes, it
Okay.
would be coming up
So
again.
that
in
would be
January.
at the January meeting if we meet in January.
Okay, I just couldn't remember and I wanted clarification. Thank you very much. And
Thank
that's
you.
all for me. And it was just a pleasure to see everybody.
Yes, it's good to see that everybody's healthy and here. I have a cough from a cold that I had last week, first cold I'd had in about 3 years. So, but it wasn't COVID. It was just a plain old cold and sore throat. Commissioner Levante. Any
Thank
business
you.
for anyone?
I guess really one thing that I want to mention, and perhaps this is a good time to say it. Of course, our sidewalks across the city in a lot of places are in some pretty rough shape. Homeowners, it can be pretty expensive to fix the sidewalk. Looking into it, of course, other cities, even here in Oregon, have a like a sidewalk repair program where the city matches repairs for sidewalks. They're all different, frameworks for how that is set up. But that's something that I want to throw out there and see if not sure if this is right for us to talk about it, but just to say that's something that certainly I'd like to see happen, or get a general consensus if this is a good idea or some problems with that. But I'd like to see some improvements with our sidewalks. I know a lot of the homes that have issues in the front of their house, might have a hard time paying for it. And of course, they're liable for folks that might get injured walking by. So I
And
wanted to
we-
mention that.
We did have a program like that that was put in a couple of years ago, and it lasted for a short time, and then I
Yep.
believe it was taken back again.
Okay. Do we have any
Commissioner-
insight on that?
Administrator
I'd love to learn
Betts,
more.
do you recall kind of what the history of that was?
She may have
Jackie,
stepped away.
are you there?
She may have
Sorry.
stepped away.
I'm sorry, I wasn't listening.
The question was about the we
Sidewalk
have,
repair program.
yeah, the
Oh,
sidewalk
we
repair.
couldn't get anybody to apply for it.
Really?
Yes, we put it out there and it was probably 4 years ago. We got no takers. It was a grant match program. So it went away.
Yeah.
And was that, do you happen to know,
Right
was that
down first,
advertised through the newsletter?
Oh, it was advertised through all of that, but you
And no
know,
applications?
no applications.
Oh, that's wild. Huh, interesting.
Maybe if we include information about that at the same time we hand people a citation for a sidewalk that's no longer level, maybe we'll get more people.
That's
I know
interesting.
there's some in my neighborhood that are in really bad shape. And I guess it would be up to me to complain to get the code compliance people to come over and take a look at that. But I also don't want to trip on it myself, so I have to think about what my application is there. All right. Anything else, Commissioner Labonte?
And I guess, is there any, I guess, a quick library talk? Any word on the existing library? What is going to happen with that property there? My understanding is it's going to be a parking lot, but I'm not exactly sure what's going to happen there. So just
There's been no policy decision made on what is going to happen to the current library.
Mhm.
I'm assuming that will become a topic of the city council in the next 2 years for them to talk about as we get closer to moving into the new building.
And you recall that one of the decisions this committee made was to allow the new library to go in without on-site parking required, as would normally be required for certain types of commercial building in downtown. So that decision, whether on-street parking or a parking lot somewhere nearby, will be an important one for the city council because it will have an impact on the parking policies that the city would adopt through the rest of the downtown. All right, Commissioner Les Poole, do you have any business for the commission?
No, I would just suggest to my fellow commissioners to, drive through Sellwood, see what you like. We're not going to change our library plan, but they did a great job there of building a library with a couple of stories of mixed use. If you look in downtown Milwaukee, while that's taller than I would favor in Gladstone, you'll see the one large building. It's over height, but it has considerable parking on the main floor. So that's kind of the spendy route, but take a look around. We don't need to reinvent everything, and there's nothing better than seeing how it's working elsewhere and tweaking it to fit your community. So good to see everyone again.
All right, Commissioner Tom Mercero.
I finally got my picture up there. I just want to say that it's good to see everybody again, and some things that are happening, which has taken quite a while, but I believe that the city businesses are trying to grow. And there's, in fact, I was down getting my haircut this last week. I found a new business down there that's selling child paraphernalia like clothes and whatever, right in the corner of Arlington and Portland Avenue. And there was a few people that were going in there. But we haven't got to a skating rink yet, but it appears to be growing, and I have hope that it's going to keep growing.
That business is the Cookie Pot. It used to be located at the other end of Gladstone, down near the shopping center close to Safeway. It was in the building where the Crossroads Coffee Place is, and they decided to relocate to downtown, probably in anticipation of how popular downtown is going to be in a couple of years. So yeah, that's a great place. If you have children or grandchildren who need clothing or toys, they are consignment items at a very good price and very good quality. She's very good at selecting what she carries in her store. So I would recommend that business to you. And I'm glad you discovered it too, Commissioner Mercer. Commissioner
Thank you.
Pat Smith.
Yeah, I have a couple of things in comment about today's meeting. I'll ask Commissioner Langston here to back me up if I'm wrong, but I think in building anything, site preparation before you start anything is really the key. And as I look at Portland Avenue, we still have a couple of undesirable properties along there, one being a zombie house and the other being basically a hole in the ground where the old frozen food storage facility used to be. And I'm wondering if there's anything in this plan that's going to attempt to deal with those kinds of things before we get started. And I realize that's a rhetorical question, but I think it's an important thing to look at before.
Let me answer it a little historically. When the request for proposals or request for qualifications first went out for the downtown revitalization plan in, I think it was late in 2015, the only property that was specifically mentioned in that letter was the property on the corner of Arlington and Dartmouth, which years ago was the butcher shop, the meat lockers, I think it was called.
Right.
I can't remember the locker. And the property was owned by a man who passed away in April, Dennis Marsh, one of the longtime residents of this city, who had hoped to build condominiums on that corner, and I think even began work on it. And he was the one who discovered that the current code really was not conducive to making, to constructing the kind of project that was economically viable. And so that kind of input is what led to the formation of the Downtown Revitalization Advisory Committee and Task Force and all that work that was done in 2016, 2017. And until we kind of make some of those changes, we may not see much progress on a piece of property like that. Hopefully this, what we're working on and what John presented to us tonight will lead to making those kinds of improvements and allowing developers enough flexibility to do the kinds of things that will, as John pointed out, the three conditions that we need: financially viable, attainable prices for the community, and acceptable in their style and form to the community. And that's what we're looking to do. So,
Good.
good.
Are we winding toward adjournment, sir?
We are, yes.
We are. I do have one other thing. I wanted to let the commission know that I'm not going to reapply for another term. I've enjoyed this immensely. Everyone on here that I've worked with, I hold in the highest regard. And I would hope that any of you who would choose to do anything in continuation of the Planning Commission, run for the City Council, I think every one of you is eminently qualified, and I encourage you to do it. Thank you very much. I've enjoyed almost every minute. I do want to, there's just one thing for a couple of you that weren't there. My first meeting was in the City Council chambers, and it was about a piece of property down off Abernathy where they wanted to put ended up being in a wetlands. The neighbors were all up in a roar over it. And they had about 70 people in the old council chambers, along with 2 or 3 policemen to keep order. And I thought to myself, what have I got myself into here? But hasn't been another meeting like that since. So thank you all.
All right. Well, thank you, Pat, for your service, for your continuing service. And we fully understand that people's lives change and needs change. And, and I hope that we'll get a lot of applicants for any vacancies that are coming up on the commission this year. I don't really have any other personal business to bring. I want to say I'm grateful to Commissioner Langston and Commissioner Poole for helping in the selection of MIG as the group that's doing this code work for us. And I'm grateful to the citizens who have volunteered to be a part of the advisory committee for the housing code revisions. As I say, it's a diverse group. People that really are going to look at this from a variety of perspectives, and hopefully not just selfishly, but for what's good for the community as a whole, which is what you really want all your elected and appointed officials to be doing. Joy, as always, we're appreciative of your time with us and your knowledge about these things. And Administrator Betts, we thank you for the great job that you're doing. This city would be lost without you. And the city of Portland is lost because it does not have an administrator like you. It has 5 people acting as mayor all the time. You kind of know where I come down on that thing. But I think we have a form of city government that works for Gladstone that would probably work other places as well.
Yes.
And, but it really depends on the people involved. And with Administrator Betts, we have a winner. So thank you all for coming tonight. Yes, Joy, did you have anything else? Okay, you're waving goodbye. All right. So with no other business before us, I will consider at a consensus that we adjourn. So the meeting is adjourned at 7:49 p.m. Thank you all for coming.